Excellent. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us from various locations in the world. I think we have EAP practitioners joining us from United Kingdom, Vietnam, Kazakhstan, South America, United States, China, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Italy. And there was someone from Czechoslovakia as well joining in, which is great. So my name is Anna Ziomek. I am the BALIP testing officer, and I will be a co-host together with Laura Connolly, who will be in the background here monitoring the chat. And Laura is an EP lecturer in transnational education, and she's also a BALIP ordinary member. So we're very lucky to be supported by Laura today. Just a few housekeeping things for those of you who are joining. Make sure your microphone is on mute. Please put your name in a chat and affiliated institution and your role. And then if you face any difficulties, I'll put, or Laura, would you mind putting your email address in the chat? If there are difficulties which are connected with you not being able to use the chat, Laura will be able to help you. And the spotlight today is really on Basim Baik, who is the head of Duolingo English Test Security. We are very lucky to have Basim. He's currently based in Pittsburgh, right, Basim? So we are very lucky to have you here and to bring you in virtually to this BALIP community. Welcome, and if you're ready, you can take over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on this Friday afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I myself am in Pittsburgh, as Anna said, so it's bright and crisp 10 a.m. for me. Today, we're going to be doing a ChatGPT for EAP workshop. A little bit about myself. As Anna said, I'm the head of test security here at Duolingo for the Duolingo English test, but I do spend a fair bit of my time both at work and outside of work exploring the impacts of generative AI technology, primarily ChatGPT. As you can imagine, I have a professional interest in that because we want to make sure that the test is as secure as possible. But then we also have a vested interest in it from a learning perspective. Duolingo is a company focused on learning, and we believe that ChatGPT can be a really good tool for creating content for assessments. And in fact, we do use it even in-house at Duolingo, creating all the items on the Duolingo English test, as well as a lot of the content for the learning app. So that's what we're going to do today. This is going to be very hands-on. So if you haven't done so before, please go ahead and go to the ChatGPT website. It's linked in the slide deck here as well. Super easy to search as well. And make sure you have an account and you're logged in and you are able to send messages. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is just going to jump into the slide deck that I have. At some point, I'm going to be exiting the slideshow, going into the ChatGPT tab. And there's also a digital handout that I've given over to Anna, which is linked at the top of the chat. If you don't have access to it, let us know. We can post it again. That contains all of the prompts that we are going to be using today. The prompts can get quite lengthy, so I didn't want you folks to be writing them right now. You'll just be able to copy paste them. Just wait for my signal to use the prompts because I sort of have a structure of how they're laid out with the goal of teaching you some certain things about ChatGPT and how to get the maximum value out of it. Cool. So what's the agenda? I'm going to just spend about 15 minutes at the start giving you an overview of the state of the art for generative AI technology. This includes ChatGPT, but also other things like video recognition, image recognition, etc. Then we're going to go into the meat of the workshop, two hands-on activities. In the first hands-on activity, we will be generating multiple choice questions. And in the second activity, we will be generating reading comprehension passages. Then we'll take maybe just a few minutes to center ourselves, take a little breather, and then we'll jump back into a guided activity. So this activity will be for generating listening comprehension passages and will require the use of an additional tool that we'll use to take the text that we generate and convert that into an actual voice recording. So if you're feeling brave enough, you can follow along with me, but you don't have to because we're going to need to use another tool. Finally, I'll wrap up with some best practices for how to get the most amount of value out of your conversations with ChatGPT, with some time at the end for Q&A and any questions you might have for me. All right, so let's get into the state of the art. ChatGPT, you've all heard about it. I think at this point, it's a very ubiquitous name, even if the product name is really bad. I never thought I would say the letter GPT that many times in my life, but here we are. It's basically a natural language processing AI. It takes in as input text and also gives you as output text. It's based on something called a large language model. The large just means that the amount of data that has been used to train this model is basically the whole internet. And the size of the model itself is quite large, billions and billions of little parameters in the model. Most people are familiar with ChatGPT. I think they've at least heard of it if they haven't used it. There's several things that ChatGPT can do. Of course, it can code, so it can do programming, it can do lots of writing tasks, and there are new capabilities being added to ChatGPT every single day. Just showing you a little GIF or GIF, whichever one you prefer, of what it actually looks like in practice to use ChatGPT to do coding. I don't know how many folks here have some programming experience, but usually programming is a very precise task. You have to sit there, think about each line, and write the lines line by line. Whereas these days, you basically come in, you write maybe part of one line, and the AI is intelligent enough to figure out what your intent is, what code you're trying to write, and then just bam, write it for you. This, by the way, is called GitHub Copilot, which is owned by Microsoft. And the latest iterations of this tool now actually go beyond just writing paragraphs and will ask you for a programming plan and spit out a host of files all at the same time. So, this technology is getting better day by day. And in fact, GitHub released some statistics that are astonishing to me. Basically, as of right now, 46% of all the code being written in the world is being written by AI, as opposed to be by humans. This number was 0% 5 years ago, right? So that's one thing to note. But also the developers who are using GitHub Copilot or AI-based coding tools are able to finish their tasks 55% faster. So this doesn't mean that half of development jobs have gone away. Rather, it's that the existing pool of programmers in the world are able to do more work. So this is how I see a lot of companies doing this. There's a thing I like to say, like, AI won't take your job. Somebody using AI will, which is why it's really important to learn about this stuff as well. Because for a while still, AI is just something that accomplishes tasks, not jobs. Like, for example, write me this specific function. Uh, the reason we're here today, we're going to be looking at the writing capabilities of GPT. This GIF is from an older version of GPT where it was still a little bit slower, but as you can see, that's still way faster than human. Being able to output text at that velocity with that still a minimum level of standard is very, very useful. I'll show you how it's useful today. This is just a little clip that I wanted to show you. I won't show you the whole clip. It's about 3 minutes. Just some context. This is Sal Khan. He's the founder of Khan Academy, a huge resource for students all over the world, especially in schools. And he's there with his son. And as you know, Sal Khan is quite interested in teaching people.
OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this format,
hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse,
All right, I'm gonna stop it there. There are dozens of these videos on the internet. You can go look up OpenAI's YouTube channel. Um, the main thing I want you to take away from this is, look, that little piece of software that's running on the iPad there, that's not a teacher. And it's not enough to replace a teacher. But you know what it is? It's a superpower for teachers to be able to scale themselves up. Imagine you have 30 students in your class and every student has an AI companion like this. And you can go and talk to the AI companion and tell it, hey, this student, this is exactly what they need to learn. This is where their gaps are. Can you coach this student on this thing? And then you go and do that with all your students. And now maybe you have a lot more time to actually identify where the students are struggling. You can focus on the human things the AI is not able to see or feel or hear. Um, this is just a glimpse of where things are heading. This is obviously for math. Math is a lot more structured and easier to give feedback on from an AI. Language has way more nuance. I just want to give you an idea that expect this kind of future in the next few years where AI companions will be part of the learning and assessment life. Maybe they're just present while you're having a conversation with your student. Maybe they're present. And by the way, the thing I'll end on and for this section is, even if you don't use these tools in class, parents will use these tools at home. So in that sense, you do have to be aware of them and their impact on your students. And if your students have a preference for using things like these, ultimately you can't shield your students from coming into contact with these AI companions.
OpenAI.
All right, so I'm gonna go to the next one, and so much more. There's so much more that ChatGPT can do. It can do debugging. It can it can understand and explain existing code. It can change existing code. You can ask ChatGPT to assume the role of any expert, and today we're gonna ask it to be, try to mimic someone who's doing EAP. And as I showed off, it is now rapidly developing vision and speech capabilities where it can hear, it can look at the screen, it can look at you. And as the amount of data being fed into these models gets larger and larger, the amount of variables used in the models get larger and larger. What we notice is new capabilities just emerge out of the size of the model. So when GPT first came out, it was super small. It could do basic things, like it could identify if, let's say, a review was negative or positive. But now we've gotten to a place where it can do basic tutoring. So can expect that trend of capabilities that didn't even exist before to just come out as GPT-5 comes out or 6 comes out. All right, great. That's all the context. If that wasn't too scary, and maybe hopefully it was a little bit inspirational. But now we're gonna get into how we actually use this stuff. So at this point, I will tell you, please, if you haven't already, pull up your ChatGPT website and open a new chat window. At the same time, if you don't have access to the digital handout with the prompt templates, we can make sure to post that again in the chat. Just let us know in the chat if you don't have access to it. I'm just gonna maybe wait for about a minute and let folks get settled and open the website. If you have any issues, please let us know in chat.
So just to let you know, Basim, I've put a couple of links already to the handout in the chat, so it should be available. Please do shout if you have any problems.
Thank you so much, Anna. And as you'll see, there's a bunch of prompts in there for all the activities we're going to be doing. Just a small request, please, no spoilers. Like, you can read all the prompts, but don't put them into the chat. There's a reason I've laid them out in order, because every time we go to a more complex prompt, I'm doing something very deliberate to try to teach you all how to use ChatGPT more efficiently. So it'll make sense in order. All right, so I'm hoping folks are settled. Chat looks pretty quiet, so I'm gonna go ahead and go in here and just start with the first activity. So what are we doing today? What we're trying to do is basically, we're trying to generate items, right? We're trying to generate test items, test questions that can be used in the EAP setting. Now, the very first lesson I want to start with is ChatGPT is not Google. ChatGPT is not a human. You don't talk to it the same way you would talk to a person. And I'll give you an example. If I'm actually talking to a colleague in EAP, I might even say something of the following form. Hey, can you please create 5 multiple choice questions with answers for testing English? And because of all the context that exists around us, the class that we're teaching, the syllabus that we've designed, We have a really good idea of what these questions need to look like. However, ChatGPT has no idea who you are. They have no idea that you want these for an EAP purpose. So if I just go in, and you can try this yourself now as well. Like if I just go in and ask this question, it's just gonna come up with the world's most arbitrary random things like, oh, maybe we'll test verb tenses. Maybe we'll test synonyms. Maybe we'll do comprehension as well. Doesn't even make sense actually to just throw in a comprehension question in there. Now, this might be useful. Look, this might still be useful content for you to be able to take and change something. But the very first lesson I want you to learn is context matters so much. When you talk to ChatGPT, you don't talk to it like a human. You don't say like short things. You basically come in and you explain to it as much as you can about your particular use case. So, somewhat useful. This prompt is somewhat useful. Let's try to add one more line to this prompt. So let's say these questions will be used by an EAP professional to test the English language proficiency of their students. So now what we have done is basically we have added more context. So ChatGPT now has a better idea of what it is that we need to do. So now if I go in and I try this new prompt, which you can as well at this point, you'll see that the questions that come out are a little bit less generic in terms of, they're not just random questions from anywhere in the world. Seems maybe I'm having some technical difficulties right now. ChatGPT seems to be a little silent on this one. Oh, there we go. But again, you'll see that it sort of makes some arbitrary choices in what the scope of these questions is going to be, right? Maybe the questions are a bit more targeted now to EAP, they're a bit more structured, but it's still reading comprehension, grammar, like this is not what I want. Again, I'm not telling ChatGPT enough of what I want. So let's go back, let's add even more context to our prompt. And now I hope you're beginning to appreciate how you don't go in and just have like a mini conversation with ChatGPT. You can kind of go in with like a brief of everything you would need. Almost think of it as talking to a consultant. They don't know anything about you. They'll need a bunch of context to understand what you need. So we're going to add another sentence to our prompt. We're going to say, I will provide you 5 sample questions, and I want you to generate more questions in a similar nature. This is it. This is the key point here. ChatGPT is really, really good at the following. It's good at identifying patterns in text, and then it's good at replicating those patterns in text. So now what I've done is I've told it, look, these are the types of MCQs that I want. I've given you 5 questions here, and I've given you their answers as well. Don't generate reading comprehension passages. Don't generate random vocabulary questions. Just give me MCQs that are of the following type. So go ahead, copy paste this fairly lengthy prompt. You want to copy it all the way from this today here to the end of the answer. And let's go back over to ChatGPT and see how it can help us now. Ooh, okay, so now this is a fairly lengthy prompt. Let's put that in. ChatGPT doesn't mind. It can read all of that in a millisecond and respond. And now see the difference in output. Look at the difference in output. No more random reading comprehension passages. No more arbitrary choices of, oh, this is teaching vocabulary, this is teaching that. And in fact, the even text format of what it gave us looks pretty much exactly the same as how we put these questions in. Because we gave it a template to follow, now it can be much more helpful. Now, I will say caveat, when you read these questions as an EAP professional, you might say, hey, that's not the best worded question, or that's not what I would write. That's perfectly fine. Look, this is giving you the first draft. This is giving you that first 40, 50% where you would have to sit down and write all of this out. And if you don't like any of these questions, it's generated how many? Like 15 for us, right? Maybe you like 5 of them. In this world of content generation being so cheap, think of yourself more as editors and curators than initial creators. You have so much more knowledge than ChatGPT. ChatGPT can never output a question at the level that you can. However, it can give you something that's way easier and more efficient for you to polish and bring up to your own standards. Obviously, I'm not an EAP professional, so I can't tell you which of these are good and which of these are not good, but I can tell you how to generate this. And as always, that's good. Give me 10 more, right? Now that you have the conversation going, you have everything set up, I can just continue this conversation and keep asking for more questions and more questions. This is nice. However, we can go further. We can even give it more context. So for example, let's say you're teaching a lesson specifically on the life in UK and the experience of immigrants in the UK, right? Might be a topic that you covered. And sorry for being a little British centric. I didn't realize the audience was going to be so international. So feel free to swap out life in the UK with your country here. Absolutely fine. So what are the new sentences that I added into the prompt now? So first, I want the questions to be all centered around life in the UK and experience of immigrants. The questions will be used in a British context, so make sure to use British language standards. Again, ChatGPT doesn't know where you're from. It's gonna usually default to US English. But if you want it to talk to you in a different dialect or even in a different language, I use it in Urdu and Hindi all the time, for example. Just ask it. So now let's go ahead and try this again. Now, if we look at the items that we got generated from the previous prompt, you can say they're kind of like all over the place. Excuse me, all over the place, just about random things happening to people, mostly about events and things. But now if we start a new conversation here, and this time, remember, we've added the context that I want the questions to be centered around life in the UK and experience of immigrants. Now let's see where it comes up with. Look at that. Now the content of the questions themselves is now centered around the topic that we provided. So many people blank to the UK to pursue higher education, right? If Sana blank her British citizenship test, she will be able to apply for a passport. The train service blank regularly due to maintenance work. That's interesting. That's life in the UK, I suppose, not immigration. Maybe ChatGPT is not too happy with the train system. But anyway, I hope again you see what I'm saying, right? You basically, the more context you give to ChatGPT, the more you situate it in your own setting, in your own life, the more you're able to get useful output from it, right? The more you are able to just add your polish as opposed to creating the content yourself. Now, if you go back to the very first conversation we had, let's compare the difference in the outputs. This output, not that useful, not that useful, not that directed. Why? We didn't put in the work for the prompting. This output, way more useful, way more useful. Why? We put the work in for prompting. And by the way, I'm assuming y'all are teachers. You have questions already. So if you have at least 5 questions that you have ever created in your life, you should be able to create more now, because that's about how many ChatGPT needs to get an understanding. All right, so that's the last prompt. Any questions from folks before we try some more variations with this? Let me look at the chat.
Basim, there were a couple of interesting questions in the chat.
Uh,
One, yeah, can you see them? Yeah.
Oh, from Gemma. Yes, Gemma, what a great question. So Gemma is asking, I usually put a separate level into my prompts, B2 level, though I'm not sure if ChatGPT recognizes this. Is it worthwhile doing this? Apologies if you're going to regret this. No, this is a really good question. So, Gemma, there's 2 ways in which you can achieve ChatGPT giving you parity with the level of English proficiency that you want. First, obviously, is literally just telling it. I think it's very important to do. So as part of the context, you might want to say, hey, this content should be at a separate level, A1, A2, B1. But what's also really, really useful, and this is where ChatGPT's hidden powers come in, you need to give it a few items at that level. Because while we as humans have this abstract level understanding of what Zephyr levels are, ChatGPT actually is able to understand that, intuit that directly from the text and the properties of the text you're giving it. So as you might have noticed, the items that I gave here were of a certain proficiency level, and the items that it's generating in response should roughly be around the same level. Yes, sometimes they might not necessarily be exactly the same Zephyr level, but if you put in A1 items, I would be shocked if you got out C1 items. And if you put in C1 items, I would again be very surprised if you got back out A1 items. So Jem, I think you might have to do a little bit of like that calibration yourself. And I'll talk later in the presentation about the importance of human review. Like the human review is not going anywhere. It's just actually becoming more intense as we use this technology. But yeah, good call. Do put that in the prompt and do provide the items at that level. when you're creating that prompt. So if you have a B1 prompt and a C1 prompt, the sample items you give in should be different. They should be at that level. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, John Sebastian. So there's a question about getting different outputs from what I'm getting from versus what some folks might be getting. So yes, there are different models that you can use for ChatGPT. GPT 3.5 is the free one. It's the less smart one. They say it's great for everyday tasks. GPT 4.0 is their latest. It's the most advanced, actually similarly advanced to GPT 4. One thing is, John, I know OpenAI has announced that GPT 4.0 is going to be freely available to everybody in the world in the upcoming weeks and months. So from that perspective, if you're not getting good outputs from GPT 3.5, we might want to wait for 4.0 to come out, and then all the things that I'm showing you will be useful. And also on the topic of the paid version, I do pay for ChatGPT. For me, it's worth it. I think $20 a month to give me back several hours of working time every week is definitely worth it. But I would recommend like try out ChatGPT, see how much it can help you. And if it's not able to help you, don't pay for it because the latest model is going to be free for everybody in a few weeks anyway. Do we get different answers from ChatGPT when we provide the same prompts? I noticed that I got different answers from you using the handout prompts. Well, that is absolutely correct. So ChatGPT is not a deterministic system. So when you put in the same input, you can absolutely get different outputs. And the way that technically works is ChatGPT generates its output one word at a time. So it'll generate one word, then the next word, and then the next word. And the next word that it generates has some probability between like 0 and 1. And it can pick different words. So think of it like every time it picks a word, ChatGPT is looking at like a fork in the road. Should I pick word 1 or should I pick word 2? And if it ends up picking word 2, then my output is going to look completely different from yours. It's gone down a completely different conversational path. There are ways of making ChatGPT deterministic. I think it's outside of the scope of this workshop. But if you use it through an API, you can actually make it deterministic. But I think for creative endeavors like this, it's actually better for its output to be random each time because that means that you can, otherwise it would respond with the same 5 questions every single time and you wouldn't be able to get lots of views from it. Oh yeah, so Kelly, great comment from you as well. This is something that I was going to mention later in the workshop. There's a little attachment button right here. You can see, if you click that, you can upload files. You can upload text files or image files. So what you can do is if you have a bunch of questions and you don't want to put them into the prompt, you can just attach that as a document. And ChatGPT will be able to read that as well. No issues. Yes, Matthew, perplexity.ai, one of the tools also I really, really like. Perplexity for me is more of a Google replacement as opposed to a ChatGPT-like tool. So perplexity can be conversational, but it's not designed to be. Perplexity is designed to give you as many citations and sources as possible for the information that it's providing. So think of it like ChatGPT, but with citations, but much less conversational. Whereas ChatGPT, I think of more as a brainstorming and conversation and thought partner, content generator, and so on. But I do find myself using Perplexity more than Google these days, actually. All right. Any more questions about the MCQ multiple choice part or generating more items? And also, one thing I hope you can see is, as Gemma pointed out, they would like to add context around the Zephyr level. Maybe you have something that you care about. That's not the Zephyr level or the topic, but maybe something else. Maybe you come from a different part of the world with a different dialect of English. I would make sure to write my entire prompt in that dialect with the mannerisms and then say, hey, this will be used in a X country's context. Can you, like, for example, if it's like Oceania versus UK versus English, Canada or America or something like that. All right, cool. Let's move on to our second task. All right, so our second task, second hands-on activity is going to be creating reading comprehension passages. And this is slightly different from the previous question because, MCQs are sort of standalone. You can generate them one at a time. We were able to give a template. So now we know how to use ChatGPT, right? Build up our prompt. Start from something simple, see if it works or not, and then build it up. So let's see. Prompt 0. I think this time you all will be able to predict what the output is going to look like. Please create 5 reading comprehension questions with answers for test in English. Okay, that's a good start. It's starting with the passage. Although the topic of the passage might be completely arbitrary, it looks like a fantasy story, maybe. Might not be the thing you want your students to be reading. Might want something that's more academic, as opposed to this reads more like a children's story. Anyway, gives you the questions and answers. Fine. It's an okay output. It's something that maybe I could use if I don't really care about making the lessons bespoke or connected to my students' lives. But again, the same lesson repeats itself. Add more context. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add the following context. Today, we're going to be creating some reading comprehension questions together. These will be used by an EAP professional. And again, we added a little bit more context here. Let's see how that changes the output. So my hope is that this will make the passage a bit more in an academic setting. Oh, wow, it went with an enchanted forest again. I guess it really likes fairy tales for some reason. But this is what I'm saying. Like, if I don't want it to be continuing to generate fairy tales, I can then explicitly specify the topic. So if we go back here, this is what we're going to, and again, thank you so much to Anna and Laura for providing some of this content here. I definitely didn't write this article here. So thank you to Reading for providing this information. So let's grab all this. As you can see, this is a very, very meaty prompt. Let me walk you through it. First, we say, okay, we're going to be creating questions. I'm giving you 5 sample questions, first of all. And I want you to generate 5 more of a similar nature. Again, we ended up in the same place. I'm going to show you what I've been doing, and you show me if you can do it as well. Questions will be in a British context. You can change this up if you want to. This is the actual passage that was provided. And then here are some of the questions. See, now let's copy this. Put this into our ChatGPT and see what kind of output we get now. Now note, because now ChatGPT has all this structure even with the formatting of everything, how I've set underlines here, how I set 1 mark, like just notice how it's going to try to copy all of that. So let's go. All right, so what it's doing now is it says, hey, I've read the comprehension passage. I've read the questions you've provided. Here are 5 more questions for the same passage, right? So that's one of the things you might want to do, right? In an EAP setting, your passage might come from a real textbook, or it might come from a story, or it might come from some excerpt that you're using. My assumption would be that most of you are not writing reading comprehension passages and they're coming from some sources. So what you would do in that situation is you would write copy in the material that you're trying to put in as a comprehension passage. You would write maybe a few questions. And these would be the type of questions you're looking to. If your class is like struggling with a particular thing and you want them to focus on that particular thing, write a few questions that are targeting that particular thing, and then let ChatGPT do the rest. The nice thing is that it will even give you like the underlines and everything. So if you get it to format things right, it will also save you time on putting the text together later. But anyway, so it's generated all of that stuff. At this point, we could say, okay, we're done. But another thing we might want to do is actually generate some new reading passages themselves. So we're going to do that in the guided activity, actually, because the guided activity will be listening comprehension. So we'll need to generate a passage, and then we'll also need to generate a video, audio version of that passage. But I'll stop here again for questions. So Nilsa has a question. How about copyright if we copy from a textbook or just any book? Can you clarify that question? I'm not sure what you mean by copyright there.
Please feel free to come on mic if you want to clarify.
Yeah, all right, it'll take shorter. What I mean is just, for example, if you use any textbook or a book,
Mhm.
we from a story that's been published,
Hmm.
isn't how about the copyrights from that book, the publisher's copyrights? Are we going against any laws or something?
That's a really good question. And I do actually spend a fair bit of time thinking about compliance at Duolingo as well. So this is a pertinent question. First of all, whatever you're already doing in your life in terms of sourcing content, you can
Yeah,
continue to do that, right? So as a teacher, there's no copyright issues with you using material in your class as long as your students are getting access to that material in a way that's, good. And now, having been part of many educational institutes, I'll tell you there are several teachers who will just sometimes photocopy a reading and pass it out to class. That doesn't cause
yeah.
any issues. I don't think any company is going to go after students like that. So I think of it similarly here,
Okay.
right? The
Yeah,
passage itself, you're you're basically just using that as scaffolding to then generate new content from ChatGPT, much like you've written questions yourself. But the very fact that you're using the passage does not have any copyright issues. Now,
okay.
if you created a test and then went out and tried to sell that test with that content and try to make money from
Okay.
it somewhere, then there would be issues because now you're using
Okay.
original content without licensing it.
But how about an article? Because I had this issue about, I mean, from other teachers discussing, because I wanted to work with some EAP students, a part of
Hmm.
an article that was published online. And we had this question about not using it because of copyright reasons. And then I thought, oh, okay, I'll do a summary and then we'll work on the summary. But of course, more time consuming.
Oh, of course. And hey, I should actually say this. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't technically give legal advice. That's just my understanding. But what I would do is if you have any legal counsel or legal folks at your university or
Yeah,
institution, I would check with them.
yeah.
I personally
All
don't think there's going to be any issues, but as I said, I'm not a lawyer, so don't want to get you into legal trouble.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Of course. All right. Any other questions about the reading comprehension passages?
Niels,
But
just to sorry, go back to your question. There is information in the chat as well, if you can access about that. But I think there is a
Yeah,
percentage.
I know. Yes, I know, I know. It's the same of with when you do some photocopying. So I thought the same. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, in the US at least, my assumption would be that this is classified under fair use because it's for educational purposes. But I would say check your regional laws wherever you are in the world. Of
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I'm from
course.
Spain, in
I see,
fact.
I see. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right, wonderful. Any other questions about the reading passages before we maybe take a quick little break and then we'll go into the guided activity afterwards? All right, y'all, let's take a 5-minute breather. We'll be back. For me, it's 10:45, so I'll be back at 10:50. Um, see you in 5. Take a little breather.
Yeah, see you in 5 minutes.
Just let folks slowly get settled again.
We've got some interesting conversations going on chat on chat
Yes.
in here about academic word lists, using them. But it's good to see that people are sort of applying already, thinking, okay, how you can feed through the information I have that I want to use through the tools that I've got. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. Like Kelly's been pointing out in chat how you can feed in multiple different forms of content in as a document. This is a really, really powerful move to use. The prompt can obviously get really unwieldy. My tip, by the way, Kelly, on that would be you still want to have like a lot of structure in your prompt and a lot of context and information in your prompt. And the document that you're feeding in, you want to make sure that it's like sort of just the content that you can refer to, but the actual task and what you're supposed to do and like the separate alignment and those things go in the prompt. But yeah, I think Kelly knows this already. Kelly seems to be a power user, which is awesome. All right, where the break is coming to an end, we're gonna go ahead and get into the guided activity. Okay, great. So for the guided activity, we're going to be generating listening comprehension passages, including the audio recordings themselves. The materials we need for this are obviously the same as ChatGPT, but also there's another tool that I'm going to be using today, and it's called 11 Labs. So 11 Labs is a company that provides a lot of various services around generating sounds, speech, music, sound effects, things like that. This is the website. This is what it actually looks like. As you can see, there's like a passage in here that I had generated before. There's a lot of different voices that you can select from. And there's also settings here, which you can use to make the voice more emotional, less emotional, monotone, or with a lot of variability, etc. So there's a lot of style control that you have access to here as well. All right, so let's get into our prompting. Feel free to continue to follow along with me on the generation side of things. Again, we're just generating passages, so these don't have to be listening comprehension. They can be reading comprehension as well. So this sort of applies and segues from the previous section in how would we generate the passage in the first place? Maybe I don't want to use a textbook. Maybe I have a copyright concern. That's fair. So let me try to generate a passage myself from scratch. At this point, I think you're all are pretty aware that this is not going to give a perfect output, but let's do it anyway, just to continue to cement this lesson in our mind that short prompts don't work that well. Oh, it loves forests. It loves enchanted forests so much. I wonder why that is. Okay, great. So we have a fairly long passage that's been generated here. I'm not sure how pertinent this would be for me in any given context. Maybe I just want to read stories about the forest. But anyway, let's quickly move on. Okay, so this time we're going to talk about listening comprehension. So today we're going to be creating some listening comprehension patches together. These questions will be used by an EAP professional for their students. Create just one passage of text. This already is better because it knows at least that this is being used in an academic setting. I want you to immediately notice something different from the output we got from the previous text. Because we said this is going to be listening comprehension, notice how the passage now starts as a lecture, as if someone is talking, as if this is a transcript from someone who was talking. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture on the importance of urban green spaces. Still likes that green element, still likes that forest element a little bit. But this is a much more useful passage in an academic setting, especially if you're trying to do listening comprehension, because it actually sounds like a lecture, as opposed to just a written piece of text being read out by someone. But let's go further. Let's continue going further. Today, we're going to be creating some passages. What do we add new? I will provide you with one sample passage. And I want to generate another passage in the same style and voice. This is very important right here. Again, as I said, ChatGPT is better than humans at reading a piece of text and figuring out what it is that makes that text that text. What is the style? What is the voice? What is the vocabulary choice? What is the level of English proficiency? What is the topic? However, we can give it that topic. So notice this little thing right here. So one thing that is very popular with people who use ChatGPT a lot is something called prompt templates. The idea is these prompts are fairly lengthy. You don't want to be writing them over and over. So why don't you just create a prompt that has something sort of templated out, and you can go in and fill those Mad Lib style if you want to generate new content. So, for example, let's say let's get a topic from the chat. Actually, does somebody want to suggest a topic for a listening comprehension passage?
I've already got one from ChatGPT about a lecture on behavioral finance.
Ooh, interesting. And that again, yeah, like if you have a certain setting where students are more amenable to certain type of content, you would want to like generate topics around that. Let's see, has anybody posted a topic? Ah, amazing. What an awesome topic. I mean, okay, let's go with that. So I am gonna put in the topic as copyright issues with artificial intelligence. Let's get ChatGPT to introspect a little bit. Uh, by the way, right after this prompt, I've also put in, once again, so generously provided by Anna and folks at Reading, this listening passage transcript. So this is a transcript of an actual audio recording that was done in the real world. Some human was speaking, then it was transcribed, followed by, again, the items, the questions that we would want to ask. At this point, we're sort of getting a repeat pattern. We've done this twice already. It's the same thing. Let's try it again. Okay, let's copy paste this prompt into our GPT window. Generate a new one. All right. So let's see. And there we go. Today we'll be delving into the topic of copyright issues related to artificial intelligence, a subject that is coming increasingly relevant. To start, let's define what we mean by copyright. It's getting a little sassy with us. Basically, I guess copyright is type of blah, blah. How do we apply this to AI, you may ask? Again, very conversational. This is nice. We want this to sound nice when it's being read out. Yeah, it's gonna say a lot of things. Just let's see what it actually summarizes that. Let's see what its take is. To summarize, AI technology continues to advance rapidly. The laws governing copyright are still catching up. It's a complex field that requires ongoing dialogue between technologists, legal experts, and policymakers to ensure fair and equitable treatment for all involved parties. So basically, ChatGPT doesn't want to lose its job either. So it's like, hey, this nuance. This is nuance. Let's take some time. Let's figure this out together. Let's get some legal folks involved here. ChatGPT basically just lawyered up in this in this conclusion. Anyway, so here, as you can see, we've gotten the sample questions as well. We have the answers provided, and I can always go in and say, hey, thanks for that. Generate 5 more questions for the passage provided. And at this point, now it just goes into a regular conversation. You can tweak the passage. You can ask it to generate more questions. By the way, there's other things you can also do that I didn't really touch on today that are more like sort of foundational. ChatGPT. It can work with anything, not just EAP, but you can say that transcript you generated is too formal. Can you instead create a passage that is very informal and a conversation between two students? I can imagine sometimes if you want there we go. Hey Sarah, have you heard about all these copyright issues with AI? It's quite a hot topic right now. Oh, really? I haven't kept up. What's the fuss all about? If you specifically wanted your students to focus on a listening passage where it was a conversation between multiple folks, you can do that here as well. You can then go in and say, hey, I want Tom to take a stronger stance on this. And I want Sarah to be, listening, but then also pitching in input, but being really incredulous of actually what Tom is saying. You can come in and give feedback like that. So make Sarah more incredulous of Tom's position. Seriously, what kind of issues can there be with AI? Sarah's taken a much harder stance this time. You're a curator. You are now the director, right? Generating content is much, much, much easier than it used to be. Obviously, a year ago, you would not have sat down and written 5 versions of the listening transcript and then thought real hard about which one you want to pick and for what reasons. And now that's just possible. So upgrade your thinking, expand your thinking, think of yourselves. Everyone in this room now is a project manager. Everybody in this room now is a curator because you have the ability to generate all this stuff. Okay, cool. So we have a bunch of stuff. Great. We can use some of this. Now let's go in and actually try to generate some audio. Cool. Here we go. So this is 11 Labs. It has a few services that it provides. First, straight up text to speech. That's the most popular service. Put in text, get out human speech. You can also do speech to speech. This is quite interesting. So let's say you want the sound, the voice to have certain inflections, certain focus on certain sounds, certain intonation. What you can do is you can record yourself reading the passage, and then 11 Labs can transform that into another human's voice reading the passage, but it will try to copy your inflections and copy the way you rise and fall and pauses and all of that as much as possible, if that's something you're interested in. I usually just use text to speech because I don't want to record myself. That's why I'm doing this in the first place. And the voices are pretty good. Some other things here. So you can generate new voices. So you can generate a brand new voice that doesn't exist. It's not a voice that belongs to any human. It's just like you can generate new text, you can now generate new voices. You can also clone your own voice. So this is pretty useful for content creators and folks who need to scale up their own voice and generate lots and lots of content with their own voice, but don't have the time to do so themselves. We're not going to be using any of that stuff today. It's all cool. 11 Labs is nice, but we're just going to do simple speech to text to speech. So this is what I put in. There's many different voices available. You can pick voices by searching here. So I had searched like British voices. These are all the British voices that are available. You could also do American voices. You can also click find a voice. It take you to a more elaborate search page where you can look up all the different voices that are available. And in the end, you can always generate your own voice. So if you want like a young person from America versus an older person from the UK, you can specify things like that. So if I'll just quickly show you. So if I create a voice and I go into voice design, you can see here, like I can pick the gender, I can pick the age of the voice, I can pick the accent of the voice, I can pick how strong that accent is going to be, etc. So if you want a specific type of voice or a specific type of listening passage, then you can select those as well. But we're just going to go with defaults today. So let's pick Daniel. Let me show you a little bit of some of the settings on the right here. So stability is basically, I think of it as how glitchy it's going to sound. So the thing with AI voice generation is that if you can make it more stable, but it sounds more monotonous, or you can make it less stable, in which case it's more emotive, but can sometimes do some robotic things. Similarity, you don't need to worry about. Style exaggeration is also how whatever style you picked, if it's a British accent, if it's a certain gender, how strongly will that style actually be presented in the voice? Okay, so let's generate this and see what comes out of it.
Good morning, everyone. Today, we will be delving into the topic of copyright issues related to artificial intelligence, a subject that is becoming increasingly relevant in our digital age. To start, let's define what we mean by copyright. Copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives the creator of original work exclusive rights to its use and distribution, usually for a limited time, with the intention of allowing the creator to receive compensation for their intellectual investment.
All right, there we go. So a few things to note. As you can see, the voice does not sound like the old school I am a machine kind of voice. It sounds very human. It takes really very precise note of punctuation, commas, pausing. I'm gonna be honest with you, I couldn't record this passage as well as Daniel just did. So certainly when it comes to text to speech, there's a lot on offer here. You get the audio file right here, as you can see.
Good
You can
morning,
play
everyone.
it, you can stop it, skip around, but also there's this download button right here. And if you just click download, it'll just download to your machine. You just have the audio file wherever you want to use the audio file, however your existing systems work. You just have it now. All right, so let's see if we have anything. Ah, yes. Beverly and Gil made a point about certain word choices. This is something I learned recently, doing some research we've been doing at Duolingo. ChatGPT uses the word foster 10 times more than the average person. I don't know why. It just loves that word. I think delving is another one of those words. Fantastic is another one of those words. It really loves certain words, which also sort of, if you're a teacher and you sometimes run across students' essays that feel very ChatGPT, that's basically what's happening. You're noticing the words that your students never use, all being used by one person. Question from Zena. So is all this functionality free? So the ChatGPT is free, although I would highly recommend the paid version because it's really worth it. 11 Labs has a certain amount of characters that you can do for free. So this passage that I just generated took about 900 characters, and I get 10,000 characters for free. If I go to the upgrade plan here, you can see like there's different levels of pricing. And this is understandable. It takes a certain amount of computation time and computer power to be able to generate this speech, right? It's not free for the website to do, so it makes sense they want to charge something. Generally, if I'm just tinkering, experimenting, the free tier is great. 10 minutes of audio is usually great to, work on something. If you actually want to generate some content like test questions and whatnot, maybe going with a starter plan would be good. You can also clone your voice and do other things. My recommendation for y'all is just use the free versions of these tools. See if they're useful for you. And if they're not, don't pay for them, right? But every single generative AI tool I've seen out there provides some kind of free, like just like a sample, like the ability to try it out. So go ahead and try those out. Delving, yeah, Zena, delving is one of the words. I've seen it use some of those words. Especially when you ask it how it's doing, it will always say it's a little unhinged. Leveraging is another one. Even the way it like outputs content, it will always say like, first of all, secondly, furthermore, in conclusion. Like at some point in its life, it read that's how essays are supposed to be written. But I'll say again, you can make it do different things, right? If you're trying to get it to write an essay and it's doing that, all that standard stuff, come in with more context and say like, hey, I don't want this kind of, you know, rapid style that you're using. I want you to use something more colorful. I want you to take on the personality of a person who lived this life. How would they write? And there's a lot you can do there. Yes, Beverly, you're absolutely right. They posit, opine, theorize, fostering. Actually, fostering mathematically, we looked at this. We looked at the actual numbers. Fostering is the most overrepresented word in ChatGPT language search. Okay. Anna, did I miss any questions?
Sorry, I'm just following up as well. I think you are on track with everything.
Okay. All right, cool. So that was it for our guided activity. Now I'm going to go into some best practices. Before we go into that, any questions about any of the content generation stuff we did today the next section is going to be like more generic, like this is just how to get the best value out of ChatGPT, which we've touched upon a lot throughout the workshop as well. But it'll be nice to sort of wrap up with that. All right, let's get into the best practices. Okay, this is where I put on I'm responsible. Listen to this, please. We've looked at a lot of cool stuff, but this is how we're going to do it responsibly. We're going to be good people. We're going to use this technology very responsibly. So the very first thing is AI and bias. I don't need to tell you that the internet is a biased place. I think you've spent some time on the internet. I also don't need to tell you that ChatGPT is primarily trained on the internet. So it's very, very possible that it will regurgitate biases that it has learned from humanity. But the thing is, unlike humans, it's very easy to get ChatGPT to say something different because it doesn't really believe in anything. It's just regurgitated text, right? So when you get outputs, it is absolutely essential to have some kind of fairness and bias checks on that. These will be based on whatever your local situation is. I can imagine the biases someone's dealing with in the UK versus the US might be different from Spain, might be different to Pakistan, where I'm from. So always make sure that you take some time or have some process. And if you generate output from ChatGPT, make sure that you check it for bias, whatever that means for you. Which leads me into just human review in general, right? Like there is now a temptation that you can just generate something that maybe it's gonna be good enough. But in my own experience, nothing ChatGPT has ever given me has been 100%. Maximum it can be 70%, 80%, but I always need to take it from that 80 to 100. So what does that mean for you? It means that you should probably be changing your workflows and your work style. If previously you were planning on spending 10 hours on doing something, you were going to do several tasks and generate some content. Now you're going to be spending 4 hours doing that thing because 6 hours are saved by generating the content. What should you do in the 4 hours? It should not be the same things you were doing before because some of that has been done by ChatGPT. It also should not take as long as what you were doing before. Another angle you could take on that is maybe I do want to spend 10 hours on this. ChatGPT saved me 6 hours. I'm going to spend that additional 6 hours doing something more, bringing it up, making it more bespoke to my students, generating multiple versions that might address different proficiency levels in my class. So think of it like that. Think of it opening up new menu options for you, as opposed to just, oh, I can do this faster, right? You fundamentally have, I mean, you're getting the best gift. You're getting the gift of time. So what I'm saying is basically like use that and really think about beyond the scope of what you've been doing before. In terms of getting the most out of ChatGPT itself, I think I said a lot of things throughout the entire presentation, but maybe I'll focus on a few again, just to really hammer the point home. First of all, absolutely make sure that you give as much context as possible. ChatGPT doesn't know you. It doesn't know your life. It doesn't know your job. You need to give it as much context as possible. Two, break down all of your asks for ChatGPT into like bite-sized pieces, right? It's not meant to do jobs. It's meant to do tasks. So what do I mean by that? You can't come in and say, hey, design a syllabus for a 6-month class for EAP in the UK setting, generate all 10 assessments that I will give out every week, get all the answer keys, and by the way, generate 30 listening passages as well, right? That's a job. That's a human's job. A task is, hey, give me 5 more questions, right? So this is why, again, it's very important to emphasize this point. AI cannot do jobs. It cannot take your job, but someone using AI and using AI to get many of their tasks done can be much more better at their job. And then their job can even transmute into something different. Uh, super important to provide a lot of structure in your prompts. Sometimes I'll even do things like if I'm writing a prompt, I'll just say like context and provide like blah blah blah. This is my context. I'm an EAP person. Then I'll say task, like do this. This is what you're supposed to do. And then maybe in like structure, uh, give me that information in a table, right? This kind of tagging and structure is not something that is unfamiliar to you. When you're writing a document for another human being, you don't just slap on a wall of text with no titles or no formatting, basically, right? This is what we call formatting in Word edit, like text editing. This is also just as useful for ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT is able to read garbled and sort of nonsense text better than a human. However, the more structure you put into your prompt, the more value you're going to get out of ChatGPT. Think of ChatGPT as a pattern recognizer and a pattern repeater, right? It looks at a pattern, it can recognize it, can repeat it. However, when you add structure to your prompt, it makes it much easier for ChatGPT to recognize that pattern because you're helping it with some of that structure. Don't be afraid to iterate. right? So you might think, okay, I'm gonna go to ChatGPT, it's gonna give me 5 questions. I take those and now I sit with pen and paper and like make them better. No, make ChatGPT make them better, right? So like I said, maybe I'm looking for a more confrontational conversation between two speakers as opposed to like a very, because ChatGPT most times will generate pleasantry, right? Like, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm great. Huh. Oh, what do you think about this? I think that's so nuanced. You're right. But if you wanted, more tension in that conversation, or you wanted that conversation between different speakers, you can do that. Don't be afraid to just keep having follow-up conversations till you get to a place. So my usual rule of thumb is I go to ChatGPT, I write a very simple one-line prompt, like the ones that I showed you right at the start. And I see what's missing from the output. Why is the output unsatisfactory? And then I think about what I should have included in the prompt. So when I was designing this workshop, basically, I started with something like, hey, create 5 multiple choice questions. The output was not that great. I looked at the documents that Reading had provided, and I thought about how the output would look more like that. I was like, okay, maybe I need to tell it about EAP professionals and what's happening. The output gets a little bit more like what I want. Then I say, oh, but I have these questions that I already have. I want them to be like very similar to these questions. Okay, let's start providing those questions as well. Iterate, iterate, iterate. By the time we get to prompt 3, I'm finally happy with the output. I can edit it, I can curate it. I generate as many questions as I can, and then I actually take it to my editor's bay and figure out what I'm supposed to do with it. All right, that's all the tips I was gonna give. Let's see if there are any other questions that came in the meantime. Amy, yes. So Amy just posted about custom instructions. This is a really, really good point. So that's one thing you can do with ChatGPT is you can create, and again, apologies because this is the worst product name they came out with. You can create GPTs. So instead of having this one default GPT that you always talk to, you can create a GPT that has, so here you can even see explore GPTs. Other people have created GPTs as well. You can give it custom instructions. And these are instructions that the GPT will remember across all the conversations you have with it. So for example, here in the example Amy has provided, there's 2 things that you can specify GPT. One, what would you like to know about? Like what would you want to be true for your responses? And then sort of structure, how would you want to respond? So here, Amy is saying use British English. When I ask you to help me write written tasks, maintain my written style, I lean towards correctness. I also like a bit of informality. This is so good, Amy. This is exactly what I'm saying. Like ChatGPT doesn't know you, but here Amy is taking the time and the care to explain to ChatGPT, look, this is who I am, this is what I value. I want you to mimic that, because that will save me work later down the line when I'm trying to do the editing myself. Could you show how to upload a file such as the academic word list and ask it to use it to create a passage? Absolutely. So let's go into a new thing here. Let me see if I can upload a file from my computer. These are some of the documents that actually I was working with. So if I open that, and just say what's in the file. So we're just checking if it can read the file or not. And the way I did it again is this little button, this little attachment button that you see all over the place in your email, every app out there. Click that, it'll pop up and upload, actually pop up this menu, then click upload from computer, and you can upload any file. So what's in the file? The file contains a series of knowledge questions, focus on grammar. Here are the questions and their answer options. So clearly it can read the file, right? It's pretty easy for it to read the file. It knows what it's doing. And you can pass in quite large, I don't know if there's like, they don't specify the size here, but I think the files can be fairly large. And one thing that I didn't even touch upon today is how you can use ChatGPT for data analysis and stuff. You can also upload CSV files, like data files, ask it to create charts, ask it to create plots, all that sort of fun stuff. But that was a little bit less under the scope of EAP, so I didn't end up actually covering that today. Kelly has another point. So I made a GPT for myself to help with writing feedback. Speak my feedback into ChatGPT and it rewords it student facing as bullet points and adjusts the language level according to the score I gave them. It's so useful. Kelly, this is fantastic. If you Not to put you on the spot, but if you were feeling adventurous and generous, maybe after the workshop, you can share some of these prompts with Anna, and we could send these out to some of the participants. Again, this is your IP, so you don't have to share, but it would be nice. But that's a really good point. Like I actually do this at work as well. So one of the things we do at Duolingo is something called OKRs, which is objectives and key results. Doesn't matter. It's a mechanism of planning work. So every 3 months, we go ahead, we do this planning, we generate these giant documents, and these documents are there read by stakeholders, senior leadership, and whatnot. And for me, the very first thing that happens when I write that document is my boss reads it, and then I get feedback from my boss, like redlining basically. So what I did was I took all the past feedbacks that I had gotten from my manager, along with the documents that I had gotten that feedback on, put that into ChatGPT, put in my new draft and said, what would my boss say if I sent this to them? What do you think their feedback is going to be based on all the feedback you see they have given me in the past, right? So again, like lateral thinking is really useful when using ChatGPT because it enables new kinds of tasks that you weren't even thinking of doing before. So it takes a little bit of like, Kelly, I think is using it very imaginatively. All right, let's see. I don't see any more questions, so I'm just gonna come back. Y'all, we made it. We're finally at the finish line. This is the part that's just QA, although I am so happy. It's been so interactive. I love interactive workshops. Now, pepper me with all the questions that we didn't get to during the workshop.
Can I actually start with a question, Basim?
For sure.
Yeah. So you showed us the ChatGPT when you can actually feed some text that you have already created and kind of ask the tool to create something in a similar style at a certain language level and so on. So if I feed, let's say, ChatGPT with kind of more and more documents as I go, will it get more refined and more closer to what I want to achieve in the end as a test writer, let's say?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say there are definitely diminishing returns. It wouldn't help to put in like 100 documents, but instead I would say there's a minimum. So you want to make sure if you're trying to copy a particular style of voice or tone of voice, you want to provide at least a few pages of text for it to really be able to figure out the way you're writing and what you're writing. Might even be useful to provide like a few different passages in different contexts. So if you're just trying to get ChatGPT to replicate your voice in essay writing, providing one essay is fine. But if you wanted to replicate you, Anna, the way you write in all circumstances, you would want to provide a few Slack messages, some LinkedIn posts, an email you had written, like, and just say like, look, this is how I write in various settings. Now I'm about to write an email. Can you help me write that email? Or I'm about to write an essay. Can you help me write an essay? So you could create a custom GPT where you provide it with a knowledge base, which is all the files with all of your writing. And then in that custom GPT, in the instructions, you would say, you are my personal writer. You have access to all my different samples of writing. Whenever I come to you and I ask you for help, first clarify what it is that I'm trying to write, and then write a draft book.
It's like personal assistant to some extent.
That's exactly right. I think of it as someone, look, it's both superhuman and like not as good as humans in ways. Like it can read and write faster than humans, but it's not, it doesn't know, doesn't have the ability to know you or learn about you. So, which is like for humans so easy. I see you, I meet you once, I know who you are. When I hear you talk for a few times, I know who you are. So that's why we have to do so much work to give it context and really bring up its knowledge about us. Because the other stuff, it's got it done.
Okay,
Good
brilliant.
question. Okay, Beverly Allen, is ChatGPT profiling me each time I write a prompt? In some of the recent, in some of the output I got today, it seemed to know that I'm in London. Also, all the subject matter was typical of EAP, nothing about forests. So, Beverly, as far as I know, ChatGPT is not tracking you unless you have the memory feature turned on. So if I go into my settings, you'll see here, there's a feature, what is it? So, Oh, maybe I don't have it on my work account. Okay, so there is a way where you can specifically ask ChatGPT to remember things. Let me try that. Hey, ChatGPT, can you remember? Can you make sure to remember that I live in Pittsburgh? Yeah, so this version that I have here doesn't have that feature. I do have it in my personal account. There's a new feature, Beverly, which is called memory, where it specifically remembers and retains facts about you. Um, for normal chat GPT, everything that you tell it stays within that one chat. So it never leaves to multiple different chats. And I think the London part is probably just a coincidence because it figured out that, oh, everything is British and everything is related to the UK. So probably just said UK. But yeah, so unless you have the memory feature turned on, it doesn't really remember who you are outside of a single conversation. Could you show how to upload a file such as the academic word list and ask it? I think I did that one. Um, in settings under data controls, you can toggle whether you want your chats to feed into the model for everyone. Okay, so this is a really good point, James is making. This is different from ChatGPT actually remembering you. So one thing that OpenAI does is it will use the conversations that are generated as training data for future versions of ChatGPT. However, that's just one giant ocean of data, right? So all of us are using ChatGPT. All those conversations are going into this one giant file, and that file will be fed into the next version of ChatGPT. However, you can say, hey, I don't want that. I don't want to be part of the training. I don't want to be one neuron in the AI's mind. So in that case, as James said, you can go into your settings and turn off, in data controls, you can turn off whether your data is going to be part of training. Could you show us how to make a personalized GPT? And is this available in the free version? I can certainly show you that. I'm not sure if it's available in the free version. I've been paying for ChatGPT for a while, so I'm not aware of like what is available on free or not. But let's just try one. All right, so explore GPTs. These are GPTs that exist already. On the top right, there's a create button. Let's go here. Okay, so there are two ways you can make a custom GPT. The first is just by having a conversation with it. So you can say, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. I don't recommend this method. This method doesn't work well. I recommend using the configure button. So let's say EAP item generator or EAP MCQ generator. That's what we're going to call it. Description, this GPT generates new MCQ questions for an EAP classroom. Instructions. All right. Please use British English. Whenever I ask you to create new items, make sure they are different from the ones you provide before, maybe. And this is where you would really put in those custom instructions like Amy was doing, based on like, hey, this is, so you might say, I use very terse language. We should do that as well. Please say and to the point. Conversation starters, these are just the questions that usually show up here. And if you don't really need these unless you're going to publish. Here, where we come to knowledge, this is what Amy was talking about. So if you go to knowledge and you upload files, you can actually upload as many files as you want. And Anna, to your point as well, this is how you would provide all the writing samples. So let's say in this one, I just provide this document. This document doesn't really have a lot of stuff, but let's say that's what we're doing. And finally, you can give your GPT certain capabilities. So you can allow it to look at the web or not look at the web if you don't want it to. You can allow it to be able to generate its own images. We didn't go into image generation today, but there might be tasks that require images. You can generate those. And finally, you can give it the ability to run its own code, write Python, and do data analysis and input CSVs and things like that. We don't really need the image generation and the code interpretation for this. Web browsing might be useful if it needs to look up something on the web. And then finally, you also have actions. This is more for engineers. So you can also hook up your GPT to your own custom backend running on some server somewhere. And you can have GPT every time it answers a question, send a call to your backend as well. And you can run some custom piece of code there. So this is useful for building more advanced products with GPTs. I think much less useful for you guys. Okay, cool. So, and then we can finally add a picture. So we don't actually have to add a picture ourselves. We can just use the AI generated image to create a profile photo for our EAP MCQ generator. Let's see what DALL-E comes up with, how it represents an item generator. And by the way, I really oh, not bad. Books with a question mark. Nice. So I would really recommend putting a ton of effort into adding instructions here, right? So much like we spent a lot of time building out these really detailed prompts with a lot of information on what we want, you want to make sure that we do that here. Note, all of these instructions will only apply to this GPT. They will not carry over to your other conversations. That functionality is different from creating these custom GPTs. So now if I, let's say, go ahead and create this, maybe only I can use it for now. Second, okay, let's view our GPT. So you can see it shows up differently from your conversation bar here. This is your regular conversations with regular GPT. These are your individual GPTs. So if I click this one, I'm in this, and now I can say, you know, start generating questions just like we did previously. So maybe let's just go to hands-on activity 1. And actually, let's just even use just one. Here, more questions like this, please. So now, because I've already told it that it's in an EAP setting, I need to generate MCQ questions, my prompt can be a little bit thinner, you know. And I'm getting the same level of output that I was getting with a really giant prompt, because all of that knowledge now is sort of baked into the mind of the GPT itself. That's a really good question. Okay. Looks like you need ChatGPT Plus for. Awesome. Could you upload the separate standard descriptors and sample item structures and sample questions to the knowledge? You absolutely can, Tanzan. So again, when you're creating a custom GPT, I would instruct you to, you know, the training materials, like think of it from a human perspective. If you have a new worker, what are all the documents they would read to understand what their job is? Put that in as the knowledge base. In the custom instruction, put your style of writing, how you like to write things, how you like to structure things, what kind of output you want, how succinct, how direct. And then in the actual chat GPT window, all you're doing is having a conversation, right? So what all of this helps you just move all of that text, ugly text that is like crowding up your conversation back into the mind of chat GPT, as opposed to just being bare in front of you, which is how we expect to have conversations with other humans, right? Like I don't walk up to Anna and like talk for 5 minutes and then like wait for a response. That would be psychotic.
You've been very generous with your time, Basim, and I know that the break was much shorter than we agreed on. So, so if we can just have one more question, possibly from anyone, and then yeah, we will close.
While we wait for the question, I'll just say, y'all, experiment, be brave explorers, go out there, use these tools. It's like swimming. You can't read about it and learn it by just reading a book. You have to get in the water. So get in the water. Your students are doing it. Their parents are going to be using these tools with them. There's not going to be, you know, any human who's not going to be using these in 5-10 years. So, you know, just get out there and use these tools. I promise you, once you use them, they will find a way into your workflow.
There is a question from Zena.
Yes, Zena, that is a really good point, and actually absolutely true. And in fact, that's how there are companies being built around this right now. So as you know, customer support, for example, can have many different verticals. Like either you need to do refunds, sometimes you just need to answer questions and give some information to people. And what some companies are doing is they're reserving their human customer support for actually solving issues, like getting on the phone with someone and saying like, hey, have you tried this? Do this. Maybe giving them a refund and whatnot. But all the knowledge questions, which is about like 60 to 70% of questions that customer support gets, they have custom chatbots. They don't call them GPTs, but they're based on GPT. And they can answer questions in those specific domains. So I would highly recommend that you go ahead and do that. One thing I'll call out also, by the way, y'all, is this is a presentation that I do even as part of the Duolingo Open House, the DET Open House. It's a program that we have, I think, a few times a year, where we invite folks over to the Duolingo headquarters in Pittsburgh, sometimes in the UK as well. We have them over there. We've had some in Australia and some in Canada soon. So reach out to Tamsin, reach out to Lee. Tamsin is in chat right now. She's the sort of main person that supports me along with Lee on the UK side. If you like the content that you saw today, there's plenty more like this in the open houses that we do as well.
Tamsin, can you put your email address in the chat for everyone? And I'm not sure whether Lee is here. I don't know whether Lee would like to share his as well. Oh, thank you.
Yes, if you would like more content like this, as well as a free trip to Pittsburgh and some nice snacks and food, some good company, please let us know. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you for spending some time on your precious Friday afternoon with me. I hope this is useful to you. Go out, live happy lives, and remember, AI is not gonna take your job. Somebody using AI will. So be that person.
Thank you very much, Tamsin. This been great. I mean, it was like eye-opening in some respects. So thank you very much for spending the time and giving us all the practical hints and tips and showing us all the search engines. Can I just ask everyone to fill in a form for us as a kind of a feedback? I'm putting a link in the chat. So we're just collecting information about how useful the session was to you, whether kind of we've fulfilled your expectations, and whether you would be able to, or you would like to join more assessment roadshows in the future. So I'm just putting that link in the chat. Sorry. Coming through. I'm having a technical issues now. Oh, a technical issue. Hold on. It's not coming through, is it? Right? No. Nothing in the chat. Okay. Laura, is it possible for you to put a link on your end? I don't know what's happening on my end here.
I'll try 1 second. I would like to stop recording.
You can stop recording, yeah. I'll put that link in the